Hey, this is Jika 2006. I'm giving you a commentary run of Arkild's 109 speed run in Forbidden Memories. I've got him on the chat with me here.
Hey, how's it going?
And the aim of this commentary run is to give you an idea, if you haven't seen the speed run, what goes into it, and then how difficult it can be in certain points. And then if you have seen the speed run, it should give you an idea of the routing, how you can improve it, where the run can be improved, and sort of some execution tips. So hopefully it's useful for both kinds of people.
Yeah, of course. I like to call this run like one of the harder runs that nobody really understands. When you watch the video, as you watch, you'll probably, if you don't have any idea what's going on, you're just going to see a whole bunch of menuing, and it's really tough to even detect that there's actually tricks going on when there really are. So without further ado, I'd say let's go ahead and start this video, eh?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So I would like to go ahead and start things off with saying that this run is pretty much orchestrated on a slim PS2, and because of the fast disk speed. I've got specific console timing here. Some people use timers for this part. I press start when the screen fades out. I count to 2 seconds in my head. Then I press start, wait for, I believe, the second beat of the second part of the intro music. And then after, I guess you could say 2 full measures of this part, I go ahead and leave at the exact frame. And that is specifically to aim for frame 706. But that wasn't the only frame that's available. If you'd like to go ahead and talk about that there, Jika.
Yeah, there are frame 706 and frame 711, and there's also frame 634, kind of like sister frames, so they've got 1 card difference between them. The ones we aim for are only 5 frames apart, frames being 1/60th of a second, so they're very close together in terms of time wise, and then you're just looking to try and get one of those, and we can use the manipulation in a very similar way because they're so similar, just card 39 in numerical sort being different.
Yeah, and that's the exact reason why I only have to spend like a half second checking the deck here. But unfortunately, checking the deck still costs like 18 seconds on the run from the transitioning that you have to do. But it like saves you 2-3 minutes of real time having to reset. As we get further into the run, we're probably just gonna not even deck check and just hope that we got the frame just for the sake of saving that extra time when sub hour is our main goal.
Yeah, and of course, like then if you wanted to optimize this further, you've got the idea of campaign routing out high shin manips. I have routed out some of that myself, and I've got like up to triple. But the idea that you're going to have to hit a frame perfect deck into a frame perfect MBD on or frame on high shin to win MBD starts to become quite difficult to pull off. And then you've got to pull off everything after that. So I think for now, we're sitting on what is reasonably possible against what is maybe outside of human possibilities for now.
Yeah, and even if we did get, let's say if we don't get triple on MBD here, it doesn't really lose any time because you have to lose to Heishin at some point anyway. So if you fail, you just do what the story normally has you do. So once the frames become a possibility, uh, backup strats would pretty much just keep you on pace anyway, I would say.
Yeah, you can put in the like a free roll there, so you can either hit it or not. But I don't know whether there are any frames nearby that are good enough to hit. The main aim, I think, of your runs at the minute is avoiding wall shadow at this part, because I know that can cost a turn, which is what, 20 seconds.
Yeah, and I noticed that when I run into that, like based off the timing of the part, which I like to call purple seto, I sing along, I kind of like sing along to the music. Depending on what part I leave on that, gives me an idea of how many times I actually have to shuffle on the deck edit on Heishin to ensure that I avoid wall shadow. And I've been pretty successful on that without having to look at frame data. It's just been trial and error the whole time.
Yeah, and so what you'll do now is you're going to aim for moving forward in the game, getting to Rex, and then what you'll see him do is reset the console. That's a key part of the manipulations that we do. Resetting the console takes the frames back to a set point in the RNG seed, and we can then predictably use it to hit frames based on timing. And I think, it's really important that we keep that idea in our head, because we're going to be using it throughout this run. You'll see it everywhere.
Yeah, like right now, the RNG seed is moving at pretty much 60 frames, 60 seeds a second. So if you're not keeping pace with it by doing proper setups, you're going to lose the ability to manipulate this game. So the idea of resetting not only checkpoints us, so if we make a mistake, we could possibly try again, but it also, as you know, as Jika said, it also helps reset the seed back to zero, keeps everything consistent. And right now, this is a pretty big deal of resetting, because we're not actually doing the campaign anymore. We're now doing the main portion of this run, which is just to farm 3 meteor black dragons from Heishin with a starter deck.
And so now we've got 3 frames in which he's trying to hit. We talk about 468, 470, and 472 for this, but only 470 and 472 work with the trying to hit a triple. The deck that we've got has 2 dragons and 3 thunders, and obviously with Heishin being quite a difficult battle, you need to be able to win. You need to be able to make THGD in order to win the battle effectively by getting an SRA POW. So you need a deck that has at least 2 of each, and that's what we have progressed. We progressed from a 2-5 deck that took 5 minutes to wait for, to this deck that's really short to wait for. But yeah, I see you missed that first frame there.
Could have very well been 468, which would have won an MBD, but it doesn't chain. And ideally, if we're looking at things from a time perspective, if I got 468 and I wouldn't be able to chain, I would have to reset and try to win 2 MBDs off of resetting for each of those. So it would just be much faster for this one to be a triple than it would be to win and go for backups. But of course, I got it. I got an early frame there. The Bone Mouse is a notorious frame on this farming, because it is pretty much the first card that you see in your hand on every odd frame that you get, going for the first and the second MBD in this sequence.
And if you use the backups, so we have backups if you win 1 MBD. So say you're playing slightly safer strats than Arkild will be using. The Bone Mouse is also the first card in those backups on the even frames. So we see it a lot, no matter how you speedrun this.
I didn't know that. That's even funnier, because it's not even the same sort. The sort in the one thing to also keep in mind here is that the way we sort our deck in the trunk, like right here, we're sorting it by like highest total, like highest stat. That actually determines the card order from the deck shuffle. And by picking specific sorts, it layers the deck appropriately. And the sequence that we get, where we get 2 twin-headed Thunder Dragon fusions within the first 2 hands, that needs to be done on a total power shuffle. But on the backups, you can sort it by numerical and then get a Meteor Black Dragon in your first hand.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to mention GMS. He did a load of the work in coming up with these manips. He got this 2 new decks that we were using after the first ones, and found these frames for the MBD, and made the tool that we use to find all this stuff. So without him, I don't think we'd be hitting anywhere near the times that we are.
Yeah, it is specifically due to generic mad scientist and his tool development that has allowed the speed run to advance to a point where it pretty much comes down to skill rather than luck. And I think that is huge in a luck-based card game.
Yeah. I see that you've missed, 4 times now? That's
Yeah.
costing you. How much time do you reckon that's costing you?
Every power cycle is about a minute. My typical cutoff time, as you can see, the best possible time ticking up, it takes me about 2.5 minutes to get the first MBD from power up. So when my best possible time after adding 2.5 minutes gets to a 104, I reset and I try again. because I don't feel like I need to have that much of a give that world record that much of a head start on the first two splits. I'd rather just reset and try to get it again. Hey, Knuckle Bone Mouse one more time.
And so, while we've got a bit of time, while you just hit this, going forward, what are your plans for this speed run?
Well, as you can see at the top of the stream, my actual focus is not really to do speedruns, it's to do 1 credit clears. And a 1 credit clear, what I would consider in this game would be to clear the entire campaign without losing. Considering on this run, I actually do, spoiler alert, have to reset on the campaign. You can consider those campaign losses. So there's plans for me to try and get this without having to retry in campaign, which would not only land me a 1 credit clear, but very likely a faster time. Ultimately, if I've got the time and patience, I would like to take this run to sub hour, which is definitely possible with the current strategies we have. And here we go. Looks like we've got
Definitely possible. And yeah, I mean, obviously the two decks are slightly different. This deck 706 plays the first hand slightly different. I know, because there's a fusion you have to worry about, or doing extra fusions.
Well, normally you would say that, yes, but the first hand actually plays the same with the way I do it from the cards I dump, because the sequence of cards, if I dump them, still dump the same way. So I just do that to ignore the variance.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and when I was looking at this before, I think I took the dump out of the first turn and put it into the second turn as a way of making that consistent. And it might be easier just to remember for some people.
It's possible. I mean, the biggest thing here is that you have to play the duel out almost exactly the same way to get the result, but the RNG seed during this duel is frozen, and it's only adjusting based off of the plays that are made. So if you make the plays slightly out of sequence, but you still do exactly what's needed before ultimately your first attack, it's not you're going to still stay on the same seed. There's variance sometimes in the seed based off of the attacks on monsters.
Yeah. And it's important to know, we talked about frame 470 and 472 being the two frame that you can chain out of, and we know that's one of these. And it's not until we see the opponent's AI monster in which we can distinguish which one it is. And he has to play the duel slightly different to avoid hitting a Guardian Star on Crab Turtle for this frame he just hit.
Yes.
So here he is trying to get the MBD2. Is this a 50-50 if I remember right?
Yes, it is. Because I have 706, it is it's a 3 and 5 frame window to hit a second MBD that will chain into a third. And getting and as you can see, the fact that he didn't play the third card in his hand meant that I could have missed this. But he played Neptune, which means I got the latest of the 3 frames that does it. So now we're going to be beating up this crab turtle. This would be the very first second MBD I hit. The reason you see that little list above my head is because I find those to be the 3 hardest tricks in the game. And as long as I get all 3 of those, I pretty much have a run. And this was the first run of the day after getting the deck 12 times.
Yeah, and these dumps will add 1 frame on, and it's just important just to navigate that seed and frame count to the point that we want it, and we know where it's going to end up with each action that we do.
Yes, the one thing you have to keep in mind is that the drop rates in this game are all based off of a 2048 scale, and the odds of you winning Meteor Black Dragon from this guy is 4 in 2048, or 1 in about a little over 1 in 500. So the fact that we have to dump little extra things here and there is because of how precise the drop is on that chart.
I think it's important we talk about this MBD3 now that we've hit. So, I did a lot of work into the routing of even the triple MBD, but I think there was a lot of errors in it because I hadn't fine-tuned it. So what did you have to go through just to make sure it was perfect?
So me and Generic Mad Scientist decided to use the manip tool that he made to analyze each frame and make sure that what these frames could do would be like the fastest way to get through these. We found that a portion of them didn't even work. So we had to redo the duels, but we did find everything worked with the exception of one frame on the earlier part. There was just no way we could make it work. And that's on the frames. And this is now a range. We on up until this point, the frames we hit, they alternated. It would be like hit, miss, hit,
Yeah.
or anything like that. Here, you actually have a range, about 18 frames or so.
Yeah.
And either you'll have them where Meteor Black Dragon's in your hand as the first card, or it's not, but you're going to be drawing two over the next couple of turns. This is the latter of the two. And then based off the way we do fusions, what attacks, the guardian signs, we manipulate the duel into getting us the Meteor Black Dragon. And the reason it's a range is because not only do we have Meteor Black Dragon, but we have a lot more options to win as a result of it. And that's why it's a lot easier to hit this one compared to the previous ones where we can only hit like single frames.
So this is, like you say, oscillating between odd and even. How much slower is the duel where you don't start with MBD?
It's an extra turn. Sometimes it's actually not slower because on the ones that have MBD, some of them require you to do a 3D battle. And that pretty much like puts it on par with some of those frames.
Okay.
So it's not as much of a, I would say like the fastest frame you can hit on the triple MBD is like the earliest frame you can hit because you only have to like dump one card on each turn. There's no spawn 3Ds, no guardian stars. You just blast through it. And
And
now
so
that we have go ahead.
I was going to say, so here we are again, resetting the console, taking it back to that starting frame, because the end frames for all that consecutive range aren't necessarily the same end frames for each MBD. So it's very hard to get out of that and go into Rex. It's easy to go from there to Rex and manipulate it, but to use different frames becomes a bit of a challenge, knowing which one you're on. And so we restart, and me and you just thought this was easier.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing that we also did to make things easier here was we took out either Wretched Ghost or Pot the Trick, which is the unique card between 706 and 711.
Yeah.
That was to allow the World Tournament campaign manipulation to remain consistent no matter what deck you had. And as we go through World Tournament, all of the deck edits, with the exception of Kaiba at the very end, are going to be cards that are specifically tailored to do it to continue to keep that consistency.
Yeah.
A little shout out to you here.
Yeah. And I remember in this duel, we made sure that you dumped an MBD into MBD on turn 2, I think once you did it and it was like, I didn't get enough fusions, and you've never made that mistake since. It's like, I'm going to dump my MBD. And it's quite funny to watch you just be like, yeah, I don't need this MBD.
Yeah, exactly. 2's enough. 3's a crowd. Sometimes actually you play Bolt Penguin on the first frame, which was enough to get through Rex's monsters, and then you use MBD as the direct attacker.
Yeah. We're still in the range, but from here on, you should see 2 MBDs in the first 2 turns because you're going to need them, except for maybe Shardy going forward.
Yeah, that's the only one.
Yeah, I was going to talk about, obviously you came to me with this idea of 1 credit clearing.
I whiffed here. Sorry. Just figured I'd mention that. Yeah, so I lost. What I felt like here is that I could probably still save more time going through the entire World Tournament one more time with successful manipulation, rather than just playing through from Weevil to Kaiba without RNG manipulating. So I chose to reset here, and we'll see how that turns out.
I think it's also good for practice as well. Like we've talked about this offline, but you need to be practicing those segments in order to get them. I don't think trying to beat the game from Weevil off the manip is worth doing in the long run.
Yeah, it's not going to help you get any faster on the manipulated segments. And ideally, at the end of the day, if you're going to go as fast as you possibly can, you're not going to miss the manip. So there's no reason to do this any other way, really.
Yeah. I was going to talk about this being basically the most recent addition to the route, if you will. Obviously, I've done World Tournament Minute before, but it was with the really old, like 1488 deck, 14,000 or whatever it was. Whereas this is completely new to the new strats that we've got. When you came to me with the idea of 1 credit clear, we had to very quickly, like work out, okay, so what are we going to do? Like we say, we talked about resetting after MBDs, and then it just became a bit of a routine like process, didn't it? Where I would find ranges that would work, send you the details to go and have a play, see if you can hit them, what you would have to do for the shuffles, and then after that, sort of refining and optimizing for you how you're going to hit them.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of it stemmed from after we got to a certain point, we manipulated the duel, got where we needed to. Then you would have me just get to the next duel, leave on a specific boom, which we haven't talked about yet. When we leave these deck edit screens, we always try to sync up an audio cue to a boom, just as a way for us to stay in touch with the manip. And also based off the drop we get on the duel, it allows us to decide, like it tells us how many message like text boxes we have to skip, which usually saves about 7-8 frames if you're to mash the text box out rather than just hold square and let it play out.
Yeah, we've not talked too much about the sorting that happens, but it's as the game generates the duel, it will generate where your cards are based on the slot that they're in. So it might say that you're getting 3, 2, 15. And if you sort your cards on the deck menu, then you know where your cards are in that sort, which is why we tend to stick to 1, 2, 3, which we'll put MBD for, attack, max power, defense, hype, or we stick to 38, 39, 40 for numerical. And then we do fluctuate with our deck edit, particularly later on in the run, where we use MBD sort of in the middle, with it being an M, sort of around 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 sort of range.
And one thing I would like to mention is that we actually had some troubles on this Weevil duel trying to get things to work out properly because we needed 2 fusions on turn 3, and then I came up with the idea of type sorting, and it just so happened that the 5th card in or like card number 5 was like always the 7th card on the entire Weevil range, and that happened to be Yamatano Dragon Scroll, which made fusing easy, as dragons are extremely fusible in this game.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only instance. No, it is. It's the only instance in this entire game where type is actually used as a sort for manipulation.
I think the reason we tend to use attack more is that we want to be looking at 1,000 monsters in a lot of those situations.
Yeah, there's not only do we want 1,000 because 2 Meteor Black Dragon attacks on an 8,000 life point total will bring it down to 1,000, but the RNG seed also has different advancements based on whether or not you attack with less than 1,000 or greater than 1,000 as well.
Yeah. And I think one question that many people might be thinking or asking themselves and wanting to ask this is about 2 turns. Obviously, if you watch New Game Plus runs, or somebody get really lucky, like GFC for example, I think he gets one against Bakura or Shardy in his last run. He sort of wins in 2 turns because he draws the MBDs, and it's not really viable because okay, I can get you 2 MBDs and 6 cards, but then you've got the AI might fuse when you play a face down, which will move the RNG seed 4,000 frames forward. They might play a back row, which will cause you to have another turn or not attack a monster, and that also changes frames. So there are so many things that can change. So the only place we really use that at the minute is at Mage Soldier, which is the end of the World Tournament. So you're not going to manipulate out of it.
Yes. And the thing that's also really important about that whole thing as well is that because of the AI's behavior, when you play a monster face up, it forces the opponent to play a monster to defend themselves. So it takes and they don't do any, like they fast track it. They don't do any kind of fusion plays or anything. So it is a great way of making sure that it stays consistent. If the AI would still make fusions and all that, I don't even know if this speed game would be able to get to this point, honestly.
Yeah, it would be difficult, definitely. I think talking about the 2 turns, it made me think about Mountain, Shrine, and obviously with that one you can attack straight into them. So if they play a back row, it's not so much a problem. You're still getting a 2 turn, but that's probably the only place where I'd be looking to add 2 turns at the moment.
Yeah, and
So you've got up past Keith now.
Yes, and we also want a Mystic Horseman, which is really important. You need, in order for you to get to Kaiba, you need to win 2 cards alphabetically after Meteor Black Dragon to put in the deck once you are against Kaiba. Of course, you take one out when you do your deck edit because Pot the Trick and Wretched Ghost are after that. But I mean, with the exception of Pot the Trick, could be good to put back in the deck. It's just they're not at the top of the list when you do the deck edit. And sometimes the timing windows of getting your deck edit done on Kaiba are really thin to where you gotta really hoof it if you want to get your deck edit in time and not miss your frames. But I won Mystic Horseman, and I can't remember if I won Wing Egg Elf for Little D on this sequence. But I tend to win Wing Egg Elf from Rex, so I usually only need one more card for the rest of the run. And that's pretty easy to do on some of these late game guys because the majority of their drops end up being after MBD in the alphabet. And sometimes we do extra dumps on the 3rd turn to try and get us in a position where we can win that. I believe that's why we dumped 2 on Mai, is it not?
Yeah. I think this is one of the interesting Duels of World tournaments. So this one caused us not necessarily problems, but I was finding it difficult to find a range where we got consistently, because of the oscillation between odd and even. It does take sometimes a lot of time to find consistent ranges where you get 2 MBDs and say 8 cards, because you can get rid of maybe 3 cards or whatever. But this was a difficult one unless I waited a long time. So I think sometimes we rely on like a Bolt Penguin to get us through, or a Fusion.
It's always a Fusion.
Yeah.
So the way it works is that it's all dependent on the type of cards in your hand. If you don't have an MBD in your hand, you're making Cyber Soldier. If you have an MBD in your hand, you're dumping 1 card into it, and then your next turn you should be able to have a Fusion or an MBD. And then, of course, if you've got 2 MBDs and 7, then you just play it. So there's 3 different ways to play this duel based off of the range that you hit. This used to be like a 16-frame window with 50-50s, but then when we learned we could play the duel out without MBDs, the range became much easier, much more consistent. Shoddy used to be like the hardest part of the entire World Tournament minute.
Yeah, and I find it funny because the first thing when GMS used to talk to me about it is, you want to be doing the fusions on the same turn every time because it keeps it consistent. Whereas in that Shardy one, we're doing, some strats are doing it on the first turn, some strats are doing it at the end turn, but we've become so far, and because we've optimized it through the help of, me, you doing that, we can put them there and not worry too much because we can correct it with text boxes later. Yes. Probably a good time to talk about text boxes.
Oh yeah, especially at this part. So sometimes when we come out of a duel, when we go from one duel to the next, it's not enough just to hold square and get there, because sometimes we'll be early or late on a range based off the drop we got from the variation of either the frame we entered the duel or what we, actually no, it's not. It's just variation on the frame where we entered the duel. So what we do is we'll either add shuffles or text boxes to get us to where we need to go to get that done, right? And other ways that that we, get to those ranges that we need to do. You'll see here as well when we're against Bakura, we are doing quick 3D battles, but we're not actually playing it out. I believe that's to save frames to prepare us for the Pegasus range, which text boxes and shuffles won't get us over in time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So a quick 3D is about, it's not set, but it's about 120, 125 frames. It depends on the RNG seed it sits on, but it saves that many frames. So you'll see on Pegasus, it's quite a quick one. I think you hit like the 2nd or 3rd beat, which is quite early on, and you've got to get some shuffles in there. So we really need that time from the quick 3D. There might be a possibility to remove one of those. I think if we maybe get rid of the shuffles, but it's a small amount of time that we can save there.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind actually here is that I don't leave on a boom. I actually leave before a boom because the amount of text boxes that I need to skip. Uh, like the issue is that you can't really tell whether or not you skip the text boxes because it's really tough to tell if you've skipped a text box when there's only one text box because you can't really tell if it's gone faster or not. So I decided to leave earlier to make up for the text boxes that I don't skip. And I actually managed to hit the Pegasus frame, which I find is the last large obstacle in the tournament manip. And I just felt like I had to talk about that because we were getting in on that.
Yeah. Talking about, the things that we do to correct and whatever, like, so when we talk about these shuffles that we do, what we're doing is we're shuffling to random and then shuffling back. And when we go to random, which is one of the type sorts, what the game does is it puts the cards into, 40 slots. And then when it's doing that, it's basically advancing our frame count. So as it picks them, it's advancing 40 times because it's putting the card in a slot at each time. So each shuffle that we do, each random sort we go to, will add 40 frames on. So say, for example, we want to make up, I don't know, 280 frames. We want to move it further along. We're going to do 7 shuffles. If it's 260, we're going to have to do 7 shuffles, but then start using some text boxes. Otherwise, we're going to be 20 frames early or 20 frames late. And text boxes are typically, depends on the player. I find mine are a bit slower than Arkild's, but typically for Arkild, we've got it at around 7 frames saved per text box with his mashing.
Yeah, it's kind of I don't know. I do little double checks. I've actually adjusted the sheets that I have to give me an idea of whether or not I've hit early or late in the range, to give me an idea on whether or not I actually do need to like adjust the text boxes. But obviously because, you know, a task can probably skip like 12 frames on a text box or whatever, and then a human can do anywhere between 0 to that.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to play on averages because no one's going to be able to perfectly mesh unless they have a.
This is one of my favorite duels that I ended up rooting out. So I found as you do more and more routing, you get a bit of a chain going on. I found it quite difficult sometimes to find frame ranges for these MBDs that were close by. And I think this was the first time where I really used a Guardian Star and thought, I'm going to use a Guardian Star to advance 3,000 and something frames forward to get as close as possible, because I found that a second fusion would take it too far, but because a fusion is 4,552, whereas Guardian Star is around 3,200 or so advances. So I just used the Guardian Star instead. It can scatter the range that you get slightly more, but because, like we talked about earlier, about the optimization you put into it, I wasn't too worried, and I haven't been too worried about using Guardian Stars now.
Yes, and the other thing that we need to keep in mind here is that this is actually one of those times where our timing, the chart that we have for timing on the Kaiba deck edit, I think the Guardian Stars have something to do with it, but we actually leave on a variable boom based off of the card we win because we want to make sure we have enough time to do this deck edit because you don't have enough time otherwise. It's very quick to pull off.
Yeah.
And I did end up getting one where I leave on the 5th boom. We might be looking for a minor optimization to maybe get it all on the 4th now that I'm getting more used to the deck edit,
Yeah.
which would end up saving about a couple of seconds. But
Yeah, and when we talk about those booms, like, going between, say, the 3rd and the 5th boom is a 4-second loop, so it's quite easy to work out the frames because that's 240 frames, which is 6 shuffles to us. So, Arkild does his quite fast, way faster than I can do them. If I came back to this game, I'd probably, drop back 2 booms and take 6 shuffles off or something like that in order to sort of keep up. I'm losing a bit of time there, but at least I'm able to hit the same ranges that Arkild would be able to hit.
yeah, and you'll see that come into play when we get into not world tournament, mages manipulation. Because on mages, you have to shuffle quite a lot. And in some cases, when I'm against desert mage and when I'm against mountain mage, I'm shuffling over 50 times to leave on the 7th boom, which really only gives me about uh let's see, if it's 7 booms, it's only about what is it? About 12 seconds.
Mm.
to
Yeah.
to get 50 shuffles.
Yeah. I
But
think this is one of the trickiest parts in terms of routing that we talked through. So getting from, sorry to interrupt you, but
no, it's
from
fine.
Kyber to Mage Soldier, you know, you've got, for anybody who's played this game, and especially those who have speedrun it, you'll know that like Kyber to Mage Soldier, you have loads and loads and loads of text boxes. And if you're going to do it optimally, you want to be going to Sedin here and clicking Forbidden Ruins option, leaving out. And so it's maybe for Arkild to talk about how he got that consistent in order
Yes.
to get it.
So the first thing I did was I don't skip text boxes. I hold square until I get to the part where you're back in Egypt, and then I mash that because you have to actually press the button to leave that screen. And then when I got to Sedin, I would I would do everything until I got, I check the ruins or ask about the Forbidden Ruins and then stay on leave. And then when the audio hit a certain point, I would then hold square and then get out of it. And then when I got to this point and went to the Mage Soldier area, I would hold square until I got to the choice and then mash the choice out. And here, I've hit the range because I've gotten 2 MBDs, but he did not attack into it. This range, I mapped out every frame when I played a face down and checked and saw what exactly I would get from it. And you get about a 2/3 chance. And if you hit the later part of the range, it's even better than that of hitting the frame. And right here with this hand, I'm like, okay, I can't make 1,000. I'm pretty sure I can't make 1,000. Can you see 1,000 out of that hand?
Sorry, I wasn't looking at it. Although I remember talking to you about this one and telling you like maybe you should have dumped Dark Hole and you'd have drawn into more cards because you know you're playing it without manip at this point. But yeah, hindsight is 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I rushed it, and since I already had another MBD on the field, it was, may as well just get it done.
But yeah, this is a possible 2-turn if he attacks, and he doesn't fuse as well. So, you know, I am looking, if I go into more manips for this, I am looking at maybe moving out of this, out of those 2 turns or out of those duels because he doesn't fuse even when you play a face down on these frames, and going straight out into the world and doing mage manip. And I found, you know, just looking at it, I found a rage for the Meadow Shrine, which would make it the first one, which is quite nice because it's the last one in the current mage manip we've got. As we talked about, me and Arkild, you know, he said to me, maybe we can do them in reverse order if possible. And then, like, if I fail, say, Meadow, and I just have to YOLO on Kapora, I can just go and do the 4 shrines with the mage manip that we've got.
Yes, the order of mages is it goes forest, ocean, mountain, desert, meadow. And I believe that order was determined by the largest range out of all the mages at the point of entry at that time in the run.
I mean, it really wasn't even based on the size of the range. It was, so when I routed this, you know, I'd start from the beginning, and all I would do is I would find a range of MBDs that was, say, you know, 20 or so frames, which is a third of a second, enough for somebody speedrunning to hit and go, okay, there's double MBD in 8 frames. You know, I can use that one, and then I have an idea it's about 30,000 frames when you play the duel or whatever. Okay, let's see if I can find another one. Find 2 frames. Okay, that'll be a shrine. So then I would go to the hardest shrines. I'd start with Meadow. Can I go there? No, because he plays what maybe Meadow Mage plays Shield, which causes a problem for MBD. Or maybe Kapora plays Gate Guardian. Okay, can't use that one. Try Forest, because Forest can be quite difficult. And it kind of just became a back and forth of finding a range and then going back and seeing which shrine it would work for. And it just kind of all came together really, and like it just fit because by the end, I know Meadow's last and it's the most annoying one to put last, but it didn't have to wait too long before we went into the range, and it did work.
So one thing to also keep in mind here with the splits, you'll notice I saved and left on Mage Soldier plus 314 in the run. I believe on Rex we were like plus 5 or plus 6. So we save about 2-3 minutes doing a manipulation of World Tournament. And then at the very end of what we did with Mage Soldier, I passworded in 3 cards: Petite Dragon, Queen's Double, and Milus Radiant. And the reason I do that is because I find that with those cards, I'm actually able to get a more consistent run of this, where there are some cases where I'm required to do fusions. For example, Desert Mage needs 2 fusions by turn 3. You dump about 5 cards to get there. But I noticed that since it's an attack sort, if I have Petite Dragon in my deck, there's a really good chance that Petite Dragon is one of the cards that I need to do to make a fusion. And if that's the case, then I've got it made.
Yeah, I mean, the dragons are just key to some of those ones where you need the fusions. In the early part of the run, it's quite easy to make that consistent, but with us winning different drops from different people, it's a bit harder to make it consistent later on. Although you don't win too many variable drops, obviously you passwording in makes that more consistent, and you less worried then about differences between your decks.
Yeah, and the less variation, the better, because it just means I can go faster.
Yeah.
I would say the amount of cards you would put in this deck up until this point, it ranges anywhere between, like, the ones you win in World Tournament, anywhere between like 4 to maybe 13 or something like that. Like, there's not that many cards, but there's just some absolute garbage cards that you could win to set this deck up, because alphabetically MBD needs to be, I believe, between 16 and 18 at this point.
Yeah.
And if you're winning cards like Wing Cleaver and putting that in the deck, and then an insect is not very fusible, and then you get see, like, I dumped Wing Cleaver right here, but if you get that against Desert and you needed 2 fusions and one of your cards is Wing Cleaver, you're probably not getting 2 fusions.
Yeah. And it's important, like, we talk about 2 fusions being important and 1 fusion being important. You can make it work where you do 1 fusion, dump 1 fusion. So say you use, an insect and a warrior to make cockroach. Now, it doesn't happen really in this deck, but you can make it work like that. I think it's just easier to make it 2 fusions by getting a dragon into the deck.
Yeah, well, here's 2 fusions right here.
2 fusions like this with Stone Ghost.
Yeah, that was my go-to. I've never fused Stone Ghost as much as I have in this, like, until I started doing this run, because making 2 fusions with Zombie Plant Rock happens way too much, especially in the 2 months of practice I did leading up until this point. So now at this point, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is your second run through, isn't it, of the majors? You had a fail on the last one, which can happen. Some of these ranges have bigger ranges than others. Some I think are about 35 frames, which is over half a second, and some, I think, if I remember right, are down at 18 to 20.
Yes, Seto third, I believe, is the smallest range in the game. With now 20, used to be 17 with dead frames, but we came up with backups on that.
Yeah.
So this is a done deal. At the end of the third turn here, you need 1 fusion, and you need 2 MBDs, and that was like the first 4 cards in my hand gave me that. So this is over. But that's pretty much what we're looking for when we're running into certain things. Depending on the sort, sometimes we have to cross our fingers, other times we don't. When we get up into Sekhmetan, for example, we have Bolt Penguin in the 5th card slot, specifically because later on in the ranges, Bolt Penguin is one of the last cards we draw, and we need a card that unfused does over 1,000 damage, and the deck is sorted alphabetically to get that done. And so there are some cases where we have to cross fingers and hope we get fusions based off the way we set our deck. That's where those passwords came into play, so I don't have to cross my fingers as much. And yeah, we just go on.
Am I right? Am I right in thinking Sekhmetan is one of the ones where you fail the most on Mage Minute?
I used to, and now I don't. I did enough. The biggest thing that I did was I decided that the sheets were not enough. Like, just looking at the sheets telling me to skip text boxes, shuffles, they weren't enough. I needed more info. So I went through each of those ranges. I saw the drops. saw what frames they were, and I put down on my sheet, if I get this drop, I was either early on the range, I was close to center, I was dead center, and that told me a lot. It told me that when I was on Sekhmetan, I was later in the range than normal. So I knew at that point that I needed to add text boxes, and I would highly recommend anybody who's looking to put time into this game, go through those ranges, get that info, because you need that info to understand exactly where you are to play this properly. And a fun fact about this duel here is that Mai's range in World Tournament and Ocean Mage's range in Mages are the exact same range to play this duel.
Yeah. So that's why you're getting the MBDs in exactly the same slots.
And the basic effect and the bullet
I think
penguins.
one thing we've not mentioned is like, so the MBDs, when you put them out, you know, it might seem quicker to just put them both in Mars, for example. But then most of these ranges, you know, someone is playing a Guardian Star that clashes with Mars, or a Guardian Star that clashes with Sun. So you do have to mix up your MBDs and just have one in each in most of the ranges, just to avoid that Guardian Star, because we don't want to advance frames for no reason.
Exactly. For every one Guardian Star you put down, you got two that you have to avoid. So, you know, like if you're Mars, you need to avoid both Jupiter and Neptune. So it's just better to play two Guardian Stars, because no matter what, you won't be able to clash with whatever's on the field if you've got, you know, if you got Mars and Sun. We got it. So let's see here. So now we're on what? So we've basically. What was that now?
We're on Sekhmetan now, yeah.
Yeah, we're on Sekhmetan right now, and I think I already have Bolt Penguin in my hand, so the heart rate, although not on the screen, is probably nice and settled now, because I don't have to be concerned about where I am.
Yeah.
But we're about to transition from this into Mountain, and Mountain's very unique because the field power bonus gives MBD an extra 500 attack, meaning that if you are to direct attack with MBD twice in a row, like you normally do on every duel leading up until this point, you'll win early and not be in the frame range that you need to be in.
Yeah. And I think that's a key moment where it really shows where, like, I've tried to move towards, you know, the ranges as optimally as possible to sort of limit the amount of booms you have to wait or the shuffles you have to do. And you'll see it, you know, I'll throw in some useless attacks here, which will waste maybe 5 seconds, but that 5 seconds that you're wasting is then saved many times over in the deck edit screen like this one.
Yeah, that used to be, 39 shuffles and leave on the 11th boom, and I managed to shuffle enough to where I can shuffle 51 times and leave on the 7th boom, and that saves 8 seconds if you can shuffle that fast. And just watching over it, I had no idea I shuffled that fast. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole idea, I believe the reason that we did this duel the way, or I didn't say I had no part in this. The reason you did this duel this way is because by throwing in an extra attack on the 3rd turn, as you said, it saved all that time in the deck edit there for.
I think it's about 2,000 and some frames, and that's not an easy amount. Like, there are just different things that will do different amounts, and it's not an easy amount. So I attack with less than 1,000 here, so 600 in this case. And it just, but what it did was it left me just almost like on the range. So like it was really hard to just hit. So you'll see me throwing in 2 quick 3Ds in order to that makes it actually about 250 frames earlier. So then, like, you know, it's just giving you that little bit of leeway to hit. It might be that in the future we can remove maybe 1 or 2 of those, depending on how much time Arkild or other people think there is in this.
Yeah.
But obviously there's also a deck edit in there and a shuffle.
Yeah, we only shuffle 4 or 5 times there.
Now on a Tenza, there's definitely more time to save optimally. And I'm looking at, or I have looked at, when he plays and opens with Beast School Dragon, the possibility of attacking into that, what frames that sort of uses each time, and it depends whether I'm doing, you know, less than 1,000 damage or 1,000 and more. Depends whether I'm using a Guardian Star, for example. but there are definitely ways to sort of optimize and maybe get to Desert Shrine next, is it?
Yeah, it is Desert Shrine next.
Yep. Get to Desert Shrine a bit further along the seed, if you will, and just save on more of that, 4 seconds maybe in the booms.
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind on this as well is as a way to explain some of the very little flexibility that RNG Manip has to offer. The instructions on this duel tell you to dump 2 on your first turn, but because I already had a fusion in my hand and I need a fusion by turn 3, I dump 1 on my first turn and dump 1 on my second turn, because since there's no attacks that happen leading up until then, the seed ends up being at exactly the same spot.
Yeah. So there are certain actions that will cause a set change. So, like I say, fusions are 4,552 frame advances. Dumping is 1 frame advance. And then there are actions like attacking monsters, which depends on the seed value or your value you're on. It causes like I think if I remember from GMS telling me, slight different animation when it burns, and that just causes a slight variation. So if you're doing the same dumps and fusions before you do that animation, then you're going into the attack knowing you're on the same frame and you're going to get the same variation going on.
I'm afraid this could be early because of the text boxes. Right, and that's taken into account in the tool that GMS has made, which otherwise would be a pain in the butt to try and do, because you'd probably have to test out every frame to find out what that variation is.
No, the amount of time I've put into GMS's tool, I can't even imagine. Hours upon hours. I mean, I think a solid weekend was spent just helping you with World Tournament, and that was for the second half, if I remember right. We'd already done some, and just optimize it and everything. So I dread to think the amount of time it's taken me to sort of put together, some of the optimizations for triple MBD, major final 6, final 7. There's been a lot gone into this run throughout the 4 years, is it now, that we've been working on this?
Yep, it's just the 4-year anniversary, I believe, was just recently. Pretty much the beginning of I think the New Year's Day 2007 was the very first Manip run that was submitted to the leaderboard. And as you saw in that desert duel there, I had Petite Dragon in my hand, and that was the whole reason why I password in Petite Dragon. And now here's one where we sub in 5 cards that are before MBD in the alphabet. As you see, I put in Komori Dragon, Akakiesu, Abyss Flower, and then I'm probably do Cyberstein and Dark Hole, and I did. So the whole reason that I did Komori Dragon and Akakiesu, obviously you think, okay, well, they're good cards. Well, when we get to Kaiba or Seto third, when you look at the frame data as far as how the cards are sorted in attack, you need a 1000 attack by turn 3. And looking at the hands you have, the 11th and 12th slots are sometimes needed for as the strongest attack that you have other than MBD. So putting in cards that are, I think you only need 2 more cards after that have 1000 attack or more, and that allows you to be able to play a 1000 plus on the Seto frames that will allow the Manip to continue in final 7, and which you'd want to do if you're on the third to last guy. So that deck edit's important specifically to get 1000 pluses in your deck.
Yeah, and I think mentioning the deck edits, you'll only really see the deck edits just before we're about to use the alphabetical sort, because that's when we're moving the MBDs to the slots that we want. And we had to move them 5 for this one because we needed to get them, way down on our list to, I'm guessing 22 to 24, if I remember right.
Yes, and that's going to be needed. We're going to be using the alpha sort for majority of the final 7 as well.
Yeah.
4 of them, I believe. And this guy, when it comes to Manip, is really weird because half of his drops, you don't have to skip any text boxes, and then the other half, you have to skip like every text box. It's really weird. But yeah, I pulled this one off. And I would say the biggest obstacles I ever ran into on this were Kepra, Desert Mage, and Sekhmetan. And Anabisius also gave me some trouble, but I managed to I just kind of looked through the frame data, had a better idea of what I was doing, and for then it just naturally improved. And I'd say knowledge is power when it comes to doing better at this run. You can't just as much as you'd want to, you can't just look at the route and just follow it. You need to figure out why things aren't working so that way you can figure out how to do better.
Yeah. So as we're getting to finish the Mage Manip now, we've done World Tournament all the way through, Majors all the way through. What would you put your, say, you've done 2 months of practice, what would you put your percentages at for finishing, Mage and World Tournament Manips in a single run?
What you're saying is what kind of if I was to do World Tournament Manip or Mage Manip, what's the percentage odds of me doing it successfully?
Successfully, yeah.
Mages, I would put down at 75% now based off the practice I did. Final or World Tournament, I'd put 60 just because we didn't talk about it back then, but you have to have optimal card shops. Like you have to have the card shop menu come up and you have to leave the shop immediately. You also have to manually press to activate the card shop to leave it. You do any of that just slightly off and you've let the RNG seed advance a little too much and you have to make up for it by skipping frames. Which is either in the form of text boxes or leaving slightly early on the deck edit screen. And sometimes just doing those makeups, if you're not aware of how much time you've lost, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And here, there is no real direction on how to beat this. Normally there was, because Jika's idea was to transition to Final 7 after beating Kepra, which, could very well still be on the table in the near future. But since there isn't anything, we just kind of play it out and
just batter through it. I think it's the issue with going from here to Final 7 is, there's a lot of work for Final 7. Final 7 is definitely one of the more challenging ones to route because of the monsters they can play, the monsters you have to avoid. Seto third is definitely the hardest one because you're avoiding. With MBDs, you want to avoid Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. You want to avoid MBD.
Yeah.
Probably want to avoid Gate Guardian if you can help it, but you usually can't on somebody like Seto because the Rangers are just not going to allow that. It's unlikely he's starting lower than MBD over consistent frames.
Yep. So now we've saved and powered off. We're now minus 0.6 on the run, even though on Forest Mage we were like +4. So, a current successful run of Mage Manip saved about, even with a mistake on the first one, saves, or just manipping 9 mages successfully saved about 4 minutes on, at that point, current world record of 111. And which goes to show that when it gets, if this run gets really good and there isn't any mistakes, the only way that you're going to be able to beat the run is either by getting a new route or executing everything faster, which I think would be kind of cool, where it actually now comes down to like optimal menuing instead of just what drops you get.
Yeah. Now, obviously, when we first routed this and I first got into it, like just after the MBDs and the deck, Final 6 was the first thing that people wanted, routed. And we didn't originally have Lab Mage in the routing process. We just beat out all the mages with Seto 2. And then we did Final 6 Manip. And it was just a bit easier at the time because you're just going straight in from the reset. Going from Lab Mage to Sebek did prove for a little bit to be a bit of a problem. I think, can't actually remember if it was myself or GFC who came up with the idea of using an audio cue. And obviously we used that when we talked about going to Mage Soldier, the same idea of leaving on an audio cue.
Just to make sure, are you sure that wasn't me that came up with that idea?
Could have been anyone. I don't remember. It's been a while since I worked on Lab Mage. Yeah, but yeah, definitely somebody came up with the idea. Fine. And then so you're going to leave on a set point. We found that the audio after this just continues and continues through all the options, because trying to get the options frame perfect or near frame perfect or in a consistent way is just not realistic. So the audio in the background music continues to the point that we get to near where Seto is about to open the doors to go into the Dark Shrine. And then I think we press and hold square on his option on a certain timing, and then we can use that as a consistent motion then in order to work out where we are later on.
Yeah, and it's a good thing that Sebek's range is pretty big. It's like 40 something frames because
Mm.
fun fact, when the NPCs blink on the screen, it actually advances the RNG seed by 1 frame. Settle blinked 3 times there. If this range was like 15 frames or something, and we're usually aiming for the middle, like we'd be in trouble. But this range is like 40 something frames, not a big deal.
Yeah, and it's a nice range too because if I remember right, it's got MBD slot 1, slot 5,
Hmm.
nice and easy to see.
Yeah, there's the entire range goes that way. So if you don't see that, you're in trouble.
Mm.
But this is one of the cases where, at this point, we actually had a strategy on being able to get through this a little quicker by direct attacking monsters that weren't Metal Zoa,
Yeah,
because then it saves the animation of having to see the quick 3D animation. But in this duel, I got 2 Metal Zoas, so I couldn't showcase it. It's kind of a
yeah. I
bummer.
think I routed that days before you did this.
2 days.
It kind of long, yeah. And I think with some ideas that I was looking at the same time as that, I can probably save some time when it is Metal Zoa, but it's just a case of having a look at it. And again, the time will come off one from not doing a quick 3D, so I don't know, 5-6 seconds, whatever that takes,
Yep.
but also time later on where you're advancing and you don't have to wait as long on the Sebek deck menu.
Hmm.
Pendulum Machine is an interesting one.
Yes, depending on the second card in your hand, Pendulum Machine can be a variable drop. As a matter of fact, there's about 3 different drops, I think, that that are on different parts of the seed, but you can determine where you are based on where your card is alphabetically. I got Queen's
Yeah,
Double,
I
just the
think
card in my hand.
Queen's Double was the second card in your hand, so the card comes after MBD in alphabet, which tells him it's one, and if it comes before MBD in the alphabet, it tells you it's a different one.
So here's a little oopsie that I did here. I accidentally put Castle of Dark Illusions in the deck because I just didn't feel like I had enough time. I needed to put a card in after Dark Hole in the alphabet because I find that every time I put in cards before Dark Hole, it pushes Dark Hole down to be in my hand. And then I ran into this situation where I need 2 fusions by turn 3. Figured if I
Yeah,
drew 2 more cards, I already had an Immortal of Thunder fusion. So as long as I drew something else, I could even get away with a fusion and then dump into another
jumping.
fusion.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was in a terrible position, but yeah, Sebek had a deck at it.
If I remember right, you sort of stalled on this for a little bit as you were thinking about it, but yeah.
Yeah, didn't stall too long though, maybe like a second.
Yeah.
But, yeah, but there we go. Got the 2 fusions in, so we are good to go.
I think when I was watching it, it felt like longer because I was just sort of like, go, 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 go.
Yeah, and watching over this, it's actually astonishing. Like sometimes when I watch other people running this, I'll notice like their card menuing is incredibly fast, and I'm like, wow, how is it so fast? But then I'm watching my own, and I'm like, actually, it's pretty much around the same speed. It's it's kind of like whenever I don't know if how many people are watching this or actually do speed runs, but if you ever watch your own speed run, sometimes you're actually astonished how fast you're really going because it doesn't feel that fast when you're actually doing it.
So just before we start talking about the technicalities of some of these tools now,
Mhm.
how composed do you think you were at this point?
Oh, I was calm. I think I even mentioned it out loud. Like, unlike any other time I was doing this, my heart rate was up there, but it wasn't like uncontrollable up there.
Yeah, because you've slipped a few runs in this final 7, going for world record, if I remember right. I think you lost one on Nightmare.
Yeah, well, I lost one on Nightmare because I dropped the manip on Dark Knight. But one thing to keep in mind when I did this run here is that the night before I practiced for about 4 hours straight on Mages and Final 7 and was just coming up roses like crazy. And I think the
Yeah,
one thing that I said, I think before Mages started was just like you practiced. I just said that to myself, and
yeah.
honestly, that was enough to keep me.
And this is high shin. So high shin, you want a moon start in most cases, or we did want a moon start because we have to use a guardian star, and it has to be there because of Gate Guardian. But then there are 3, 4, 5, 6 isolated frames where he starts Blue Eyes White Dragon. You can't get your Guardian Star or whatever.
Yeah, or he'll start Song of the Thunder. Either way,
Yeah,
like not a good spot to be in.
yeah, it's really awkward. But I think you went through and sort of worked all those out, have different backups, and it'll just be that the ones that you'll have the main bulk that you'll do with the Guardian Star, and then these separate ones will have completely different looking booms and shuffles, but they'll just get you to the same point anyway.
Yeah, luckily we hit a frame that played out normally, and the drop I got was Flame Cerebrus, which is fantastic because according to the notes, I only had to skip one text box, which I did without any problem. And it's because Seto's frame range is about 20. You know, the fact that I was good. And this duel is actually very interesting because if we did not do any extra work on it, this would have failed. So what we basically did was previously we just ran into a situation where if Blue Eyes was played on second turn, we just scoop and say, darn. But we did some extra work and was like, well, if we pull off a fusion, you know, considering fusion and Guardian Star isn't that much of a difference in the long run, based on how many shuffles we had to do on Dark Knight, we could just do a fusion and then we'd just be able to go in on less shuffles. And that's what actually goes on here. Because he played Black Skull.
The issue you nearly had with that starting hand was, you know, having too much fusion material in there. But luckily it just worked out because I think you have to dump 2.
Yeah, you have to dump 2. On the very earliest frames of the range, dumping 2 will make you lose because the first 2 frames of the range need you to dump 3. And that's actually the reason why you put Dark Hole in the deck, is because that way we have a magic to dump when we're against Seto.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got my fusion. He played Blue Eyes. We got through it. And like I said, if we didn't come up with those backup strats to deal with Blue Eyes, this run would pretty much be dead and we'd have to guess.
Yeah, and I think this was the point, and usually is the point. Obviously, from a routing standpoint, I know how difficult or how small Seto range can be, and how it feels. And this is the one where I was like, okay, you know, we've got a real chance here. You've got out of it with the minute. If we hit Dark Knight, because of all the options and everything, text boxes, if I see him hit Dark Knight, I'm confident here that it's just going to be put away.
Yeah, exactly. Because because with Nightmare, even if you miss the range, you're still in a pretty good spot because Nightmare doesn't really play anything that competes with MBD. He might play an MBD of his own, but you know, worst case scenario, if you're still close, he'll play an MBD of his own, but you'll have like more than one, which means you can just crash it or even keep it on the field and just move on. But go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think in this duel, there's an interesting frame on this Dark Knight. So,
yes, if he plays Garuzi's first turn, which is a Mars, then he's going to play Goblin Fan second turn. Which, if there's no monster on the field, that kind of puts the Manip frame in a weird spot. So I did some research, played out that frame, saw where I was, and then determined what I would need to do after playing that frame to get to the Nightmare range properly. And yeah, luckily it was only one frame, so I didn't have to do that much research on it. Not over yet. And then we have, I know we need a 1,000 plus turn 3. I saw Bolt Penguin, so I knew we were good. It was looks like a double Cosmo Queen frame. But at this point, I'm pretty much feeling like it's locked up because, like we talked about, the Nightmare range is pretty free, unless I choke horribly. But
it's nice to just watch it over again anyway.
Absolutely. And I would say...
Do you remember how big the Nightmare range is?
It's only 20 frames. It's about the same. It's the same range as Seto's. But there's so many 50-50s outside of it that still puts you in a good spot.
Yeah, and like you say, like if I remember right, there are some Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragons if you're substantially early. But if you're early, you're still getting an MBD, or if you're late, it's easy modes and you're getting an MBD in like the second and third turn. So eventually you are going to win.
One thing to keep in mind is that what you actually have to do with the name edit on this, or with the deck edit, is that you only have to put in 2 cards after MBD, but I take out 1 before and 2 after to put the 3 basic insects back in the deck, just for the fact that the identifying factor of the starter deck that you get is to having 3 basic insects in it. So I figured, let's go full circle with it.
Yeah, it's a nice shout.
Yeah, hand looks good. There we go. I drew the second MBD and I have a Bolt Penguin. It's over. And
And that's why we're not even panicking about Guardian Stars here. You know, put them both in Mars because you know he's not playing Gate Guardian.
Yeah, just get it done. And yeah, my heart's already racing again. This was a good feeling. This is a great thing. Like, I've been on a 2-week vacation from doing this run. It's cool to see this, to like get me inspired to get back in there and do better.
Let's fucking do it.
But yeah, we decided to do a full 3D battle. You know, because why not? It's like the equivalent of saving the animals in Super Metroid. I can do a full 3D battle and still world record by 2 minutes, so why the hell not? But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I would say, you know, this is definitely a lot of information to take in. I doubt we even covered all of it. I mean, we only had an hour to do it.
Probably not. I mean, I would say I've just enjoyed, you know, watching this run back while commentating on it. It's a very interesting run to me. I like the idea of optimizing a run, using RNG manip. You know, I like the idea of breaking the game down. I could not get past any of the shrines when I was a kid because I just didn't go and grind. So the idea that now we do 3 grind duels or 3 farm duels on High Shin and just go and beat the game is like amazing to me. It's like, bam, we've done it. You know, that's how I should have done it as a kid.
But yeah, this was a really cool run. I would say that if anybody watching this has any questions about things we might not have covered specifically, just throw it in the comments. And I'm sure Jico will probably, if he's got some time, rush in there and answer.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'm keeping an eye on it. I think they're talking about the run in general. There are definitely a few places that we can improve the route, or other people can improve the route, just to save a bit of time. And I definitely think that sub 1 is possible.
Oh, it certainly is. But the more that we can do on it to optimize it, the more and more possible it would be. I would say the most optimized it could probably get in this case would be okay, so we know the task is about 40 minutes, right? So how much time do you think the run could get down to from a human standpoint?
Yeah, I think it depends on what people want and what people are willing to do. You know, like Super Mario 64, for example, has got really optimized because people are willing to put in them frame perfect tricks that, you know, they're going to do. Whereas, you know, I can't see anybody willing to grind frame perfect deck into frame perfect MBD and campaign, which will save time because, you know, you could get the 3 without resetting potentially.
Right.
But it's just, I can't see people doing that.
Yeah.
So maybe, you know, with a bit of cutting out time of resets by not having to do a reset between World Tournament and Mage manip, you can save another 40 seconds, a bit more time. Maybe looking at 57. I don't know. It's hard to say without, you know, really going and doing runs. And I've not done runs for a long time. I feel well out of the loop. I tried it for a while and was like, nah, I can't get back into this.
Well, the most important part to say is that this run was a 109.30. I'm still not done with it yet. The best run I could probably squeeze out will be a sub hour. But I mean, even after that sub hour is squeezed out, there's still plenty of ways the time can be saved. Most of it's, I would say, going to come from not playing faster, but more so routing it differently. So if you're ever looking to, you know, if you're looking to beat a time, then try to do everything that you see the world record does a little faster. If you're looking to crush the time, you got to bring out a new route, maybe something that saves a power cycle, something like that, because until that happens, you know, you might only be looking to shave a couple seconds here and there. But if you're looking for big drops, like, you know, previously before the 111 was the record, there was a 119. You know, there was some mage manip in there that kind of saved things. I believe at that point in time, there was also then it was final 7 instead of final 6 manip.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you see big route changes, you'll see time crushing. But, you know, if you're looking to save a little bit of time, I mean, you can save a lot of time on this run right now just by doing everything properly. But once everything is done properly, I would say the next step would be to, you know, take out a power cycle. something like that. I would say if someone was able to pull this off perfectly without any power cycles and did it all on one, it would probably take about maybe 50, I would say 52, 53 minutes.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I think the most important thing to do, you know, those people that want to see the world record get beat again, is to make sure you go and follow Arkild on Twitch. Just make sure you do that. You know, there might be other people who are running Manip. Not sure yet. We'll see. But definitely Arkild. In the coming days, you'll see some runs from him. And keep your eye out on YouTube for more speed runs of this, because it might be that, you know, he's posted one up in the next week or so.
We'll hope. Fingers crossed. I don't know if it'll take a week, but I'll definitely do my best to get one out that'll beat this one, because there's tons of room for improvement, especially with all those mistakes you saw in the beginning. But hey, I mean, if you're already at this point in the video, you either skipped ahead, you damn cheater, or you watched the whole thing. So thanks a lot for joining us in this little adventure of how Forbidden Memories got broken just a little more than the last time it was.
Yeah, thank you very much.